Hey everyone, this is Carla Black coming to you from Austin, Texas with another episode of Highly Unorthodox, the show that takes you behind the scenes of the hit Netflix TV series Unorthodox. Today I'm so excited to speak to Michal Birnbaum. She is an Israeli actress who's been living in New York the past 8 years, and she has so much insight into the community and into acting, and she'll tell us all about her role on the show. So here's Michal. It's so nice to meet you. And
You too. First of all, I have to say I love Austin, and I'm kind of jealous that you're there. I was there last summer. It's the coolest, hippest place.
But I'm equally jealous of you because all I want to do is go to Israel.
Mm.
And is that where you live full time?
No, I live in New York, very close to Williamsburg. But, I decided to brave the pandemic here with my family.
So how long have you been in New York? Did you grow up in Israel?
I grew up here in Israel, in Bnei Brak, which is a very religious, Ultra Orthodox town. I moved to New York to pursue acting 8 years ago.
Wow. So was your family religious or not religious?
Yes, they still are. It's kind of hard to place them. They also had a little journey over time, but yeah, they're religious. They're Orthodox.
So when you tried out for the show, obviously I'm sure it helped that your Yiddish was up to par.
I grew up hearing Yiddish a lot. I did not grow up speaking it, but I started learning it or being more curious about it when I was doing my short film, Division Ave, 3 years ago. And ever since, I've been learning the language.
What inspired you to do Division Ave?
I went to synagogue one Shabbat, and then the rabbi of the synagogue up in Washington Heights talked about this phenomenon that's happening in Brooklyn, where domestic workers are not getting paid properly by the Jewish people that hire them. And he shared with us a specific story of a Jewish guy being arrested after doing that. And I got really curious about it, and I started just learning about this topic, and I approached the organization that's helping cleaning ladies in Brooklyn with this, and I partnered with my friend from theater school, Lorena, and two of us, we wanted to tell a story of the Jewish and Latin community in Brooklyn kind of coming together.
I was very struck how the husband says, stick to your own kind and help your own kind. What are you helping them for?
Right. I mean, it's this line gets a lot of people maybe don't feel very comfortable about this line in my film. I personally, this is exactly how I grew up. That's the message that I got growing up in Orthodox institutes and schools, and all the commandments that apply to our people don't necessarily apply to outsiders, and we should favor our people. Yeah.
So many of the people involved with Unorthodox have a stories where they were part of the community and they left. Was that something that also was your journey as well, or was it different for you?
Not quite. I don't know if I ever left. Also, my parents they're quite understanding and open, so I didn't feel the need to really kind of leave and completely change my lifestyle. Usually religious women in Israel don't go and serve in the armies, which is something that I did. So that was, I'd say, the biggest transition that I've done. And then transitioning to acting wasn't so crazy as going to the army.
Right? I'm sure your family is like, okay, if you went to the army. In fact, I'm so tickled by your skill set on your resume, which reads stage combat, Torah reading, M16 shooting, piano, ukulele, sewing, radio hosting, and tap dance. That has got to be the most disparate skill set I have ever seen.
Yeah, it's funny. I love sewing. I love fashion, so I do that too. Yeah, M16. I mean, it's funny because I'm very short. I'm 5 foot tall, but I had 2 centimeters too much in the army to give me like the shorter M16. So I would walk around with this M16, like 2/3 of my height, and you would see this little redhead girl with like, it's just ridiculous the way
The
I looked at
mini
the time.
M16.
But I could shoot it. I totally do. You have to do it every 6 months to keep the training. So
I was trying to imagine you doing all these things at once. So I was trying to imagine
with a rifle in my hand,
with a ukulele and sewing and the M16 and tap dancing. I just got a chuckle out of that. So tell me about your role in Unorthodox, because that's a very pivotal role and kind of unforgettable that Esty knows absolutely nothing about sex. She doesn't even know her own anatomy at 19 years old. Did you know about this before you got the role?
Yes, in the religious high school that I went to, when you are a senior, you kind of learn about it. Also, the boys, by the way, actually, one of my teachers was a Kallah teacher on the side. It's not really a profession. It's usually something that women do on the side. So yeah, I knew it existed from a young age, because the assumption is that young people are not supposed to have sex before they get married. So they need instructions for their first night together.
So of course, when you say the assumption.
Listen, yeah, I mean, I don't know that everyone actually does. Depends on what community. I would assume in the Satmar community in Williamsburg, yes, like 99% of people don't have sex before marriage, or 90, I don't know. Where I come from, it's a little more of a lenient community, and I feel like that's not the case. But everyone pretends that it's the case if they want to continue to be part of the community.
So is that a volunteer job that people do, or is that an actual paid job when you say it's
an interesting question. I think very much like a shadchan, like a matchmaker.
Okay.
It's, you do it, and then you kind of, the couple or the bride gives you a present kind of at the end of the process, so, or some money. So it's not like a set, like, oh, I take this much for an hour. It's
more like a mitzvah.
Yeah, it is. Very
and do
much.
Men have the same kind of training, or how do they figure it out?
Yeah, they do. They do. There's a man that teaches the groom. Yeah.
How did you get the role on Unorthodox?
I heard about the show, that it's coming out, and I was so curious about it. I read the book years ago when it came out, and was fascinated by it and by Deborah's writing. And then I just ended up sending the showrunners a scene from my film where I speak Yiddish, and that's how I got to audition for the show.
Had you spent time in Berlin before shooting the show?
It was my first time in Berlin, and I did feel a little bit like Esty, I have to say. It wasn't a very necessarily easy experience, I mean, the memory of the Holocaust is in every corner of the city. At the same time, I do have a lot of friends, Israeli friends, Jewish friends who live there, who, because it's this international city and it's very easy to get around. Everyone speaks English, and they feel like art is supported, theater is supported there. At the same time, Germany, it's hard. For me, it was hard, and it was hard to hear the language all around. I took time to explore the city and take a tour and really get to know those, the parts of the city and the wall. It was fascinating.
So did you have to do a lot of research for that role?
I did hear from different people about their experiences. And, it was just really important to me to think, as my character, how was her experience? When she learned, it wasn't so long ago. I love how the writers of the show made her, usually stereotypically she would be an older woman. And I love how they made her kind of Esty's peer. I think maybe she had one experience with her own Kallah teacher, but then when she became one, she was like, okay, I think it should be actually really graphic, explain more. I think a lot of people who are not familiar with the Hasidic community think like that my character doesn't provide her with any information at all. But other people might say, wow, that was informative. So I think, at least for me, my character, she thinks she's the best Kallah teacher in the world, you know. She's doing a really good job and explaining everything she needs to know. All the other stuff she doesn't need to know about, you know.
But the expression on Shira's face of sheer horror and shock, and how was the Kallah teacher able to make a diagnosis?
So in real life, a lot of women go to doctors, and a lot of doctors are not aware of vaginismus, and they often would tell you something like, oh, you know, just relax, just drink some wine. And in many ways, my character does the same. She's like, okay, just breathe. But the fact that she knows the name and the fact that she gives her dilators is huge. Like most GYNs wouldn't even do that. She probably just knows it from experience, and a lot of doctors don't. I also think she doesn't really know, you know, before the vaginismus, she kind of shows her how to pleasure her husband. So I think my character suspects that actually maybe it's Yankees has an issue there. So I don't know that she for sure knows who's kind of trying to target a few different problems, because we don't know exactly what the problem is.
And then also the whole idea of having sex is supposedly just to be procreating anyway.
You know, later on, Esty does say, well, according to the Talmud, you're obligated to pleasure me, which is true, and it's also in the ketubah. It says that in the kind of marriage prenup, the Jewish prenup. So it's in the writings, and men study it. They don't always go by it and really implement it in their lives.
Right. And of course, he's telling his mother everything, which is doesn't really help matters any.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people who watch it kind of found it extreme. I think it's totally plausible, and not even just in the Hasidic community. Like, yeah, men are attached to their mother, and they tell them a lot.
Did you come from a large family or a small family?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 5, so I guess it depends what you're comparing to. I mean, in Williamsburg, you have 12, 14 kids. In a Orthodox community, that would be, I guess, a minimum of 5.
So what are you working on now?
Yeah, we just released Division Ave on YouTube, and it's going well. So I'm excited about that. We're hoping to maybe one day make it into a feature. I don't know. I'm also writing a full-length play. I love the theater, is like by far my biggest passion. So I'm writing that, hoping that the theater will come back. I mean, who knows when. But I think, you know, as much as I love TV and film, there's no replacement to being in the same room with your audience and just feeding off of their reactions. It's just, for an actor, it's, I think, the best experience in the world.
And also, people's reactions are not always the same. You know, like people will laugh at a line one night and the next night they're laughing at something totally different. So audiences have their own energy as well.
Yeah. Every day it's just a completely different show.
I have found with the people working on Unorthodox, and I don't know whether this is just because they have such a wide skill set or not, but I've noticed that everybody seems to do quite a few things. The woman who was the creative director, Sabine, also is a writer, also does music supervision. It seems that everybody wears a lot of hats these days. Is that for fun or necessity?
That's a good question. I think probably both. I mean, as an actor, you only have so much control. It's another reason why I love theater, because in film, you know, there's editing, there's so much goes into the final result, and in theater, you really go through a process from beginning to end. Usually the play doesn't go back and forth in time. That makes a whole different story, but you really get to experience kind of the so-called the arc of the character from beginning to end every night. And I totally see why actors, they would be interested in writing and in composing, to kind of be even more involved in the story.
Have you been surprised by the response?
I knew it's going to be a hit since the moment I read the script. I just knew it's going to be so skillfully written. I love how it goes back and forth and how the drama just builds up. I knew it's going to be a hit in the Jewish world, but I did not expect people from completely different cultures to relate so much to Esty's journey. It's amazing. It's great.
What kind of letters do you get? What do they say?
The show is very dramatic, so they loved how there's like this comic relief, with my character. She has a lot of absence makes the heart grow fonder, those very American
right, those 2 weeks.
Yeah, so people really enjoyed it. Just oh, okay, they speak Yiddish, but they are just people, and they're modern. They live in New York, they're still, yes, they're Hasidic, they're from Satmar community, they're still New Yorkers.
Did you know Shira before?
Just from watching Shtisel.
Shtisel? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was brilliant in Shtisel. Yeah, and then we met on set.
Well, it's delightful speaking to you. Anything you want to add?
No, thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla. Have a good rest of your day, and thank you for having me.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Highly Unorthodox is brought to you by Texas Hill Country Homes, serving all your residential needs in Central Texas, and Creative by Carla, empowering your most creative self. Join us again next week for another episode of Highly Unorthodox. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe